Would you say that you're a proponent or an advocate for keto being probably the best way to feed not just your body, but to feed your brain?
Yeah, for sure. So basically the brain, again, can run off of sugar. And we used to think the brain could only run off of glucose, but now we know that it can run off of ketones. You see, fatty acids, most of our cells can burn fatty acids for fuel. However, fatty acids don't effectively cross the blood-brain barrier. So they're not able to get into the brain to be able to be used as an energy source, at least not at the quantity that the brain would need them. Because the brain's really energy demanding, uses a lot of energy and burns a lot of calories on a regular basis. And so in order to get some sort of alternative fuel source for glucose, because you see our ancestors didn't have pantries and refrigerators. So our ancestors, they were feast or famine. So they would have a good harvest, they would eat, they would feast. And when harvest ran out, right, in the winter season, less food. They had a good hunt, great, they would eat, but then they would sometimes have to go days without food. And so for the human species to survive and thrive, God had to put a system in us that allowed us to get fuel without like continually eating every day. Right, yeah. And so what's interesting is you actually, and hunters, you actually get more drive when you go a few days, like you actually get more anabolic drive, more growth hormone, things like that when you're in a fasted state. I actually work out in a fasted state, typically like 16, 18 hours fasted 1 day a week. I do a 24-hour fast. And then I actually work out at the end of that fast. And I actually feel amazing. I feel incredible, have great drive. And that's because to some degree, my body's hungry. And the hunger, so when you go this period of time without food, your body will actually take fatty acids, so fat from your own body, and will turn it into ketones in the liver. And ketones are smaller molecules than fatty acids. They're water soluble. They cross the blood-brain barrier, and the brain loves them. And sugar is a dirty fuel source. The benefit of burning sugar is you can do it without oxygen. You can do it quickly and without the presence of oxygen. So like if you're exercising at a real high intensity, you're going to burn sugar during that short period of time. And that's why you might feel like burn in your muscles. And that's the acid that's forming because you're burning all the sugar and you don't have enough oxygen to convert that acid back into another molecule so you can actually continue to create energy. So the acid builds up. So that's great. And that's normal part of function. And that's the way we were designed. However, when we burn ketones or fat for fuel, we actually produce significantly more energy than when we burn sugar and a lot less metabolic waste. So going back to the idea, sugar is a dirty fuel. The reason why I say that is because we do convert energy out of it, but we produce a lot of metabolic waste, a lot of free radicals. We drive up inflammation in the body when we're burning too sugar for too long a period of time. So it's counterproductive to overall health, counterproductive to good brain health. It ages us, accelerates the aging process. So for the most part, most of the time, we actually want to be burning fat or ketones as an energy source. And again, the brain loves ketones. In fact, when ketones are elevated in the brain, it shuts down that neuroinflammasome that I was talking about, that inflammation amplifier, shuts that down. It actually increases something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which increases the development of nerves and improves the gaps between the nerves. We call that synapses, and improves the sensitivity and the production of neurotransmitters. We hear about years ago, you used to hear things like depression was a chemical imbalance, right? We still hear things like that. We know today it's not a chemical imbalance. It's just a dysregulated neurochemistry pattern in the brain. And so by getting ketones elevated in the brain, there's a lot of research showing we can really reverse a lot of these types of things, right? Re-regulate these things. And it's huge for neurodegenerative conditions. People are dealing with things like dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. More and more research coming out about the therapeutic effect of ketones. They even did a study where you can actually take MCT oil, for example. So the way that you produce ketones is a couple different ways. One is, You can eat a low carbohydrate diet that's high in fat, what we call a ketogenic diet. And so that's a diet that's typically about 60 to 80% fat, right? As you're getting for counting your calories, your macronutrients, 60 to 80% fat, roughly 20 to 30% protein, and about 5% or so of your calories coming from carbohydrates, maybe 10% for somebody that's very insulin sensitive.
Okay.
So that sort of diet will help get ketones elevated in your bloodstream. So that's a ketogenic diet. You can also do it by fasting, by doing intermittent fasting, where you might eat your meals in like a 6 or 8 hour eating window, or even tighten it up and eat like 2 meals in like a 4 hour eating window. So that would be like eating at, 12 p.m. and then eating again at, let's say, 3:30. Right. And those are your 2 meals throughout the day. You're getting all your calories in that period of time. And then you've got a 20-hour fast. Right.
Okay.
And that's definitely going to get your body producing ketones and getting those elevated. So that's a way. Intermittent fasting, or doing an extended fast where you do like a 3-day fast or a 5-day fast. And you could do that fast, water fast. You could do a bone broth fast or things like that. As long as you're keeping your calories really low during that fasting period, you're going to produce ketones, right? So that's another way. Another way to produce ketones, and this is really just something you can implement in any sort of diet, is actually using MCT oil, particularly C8 only, where you have different types of medium chain triglyceride fats. And these come naturally in things like coconut oil. Yeah. But coconut oil is higher. It's only about, I think it's like 8%, 8 or 16% C8. So it's not as high in that particular, and C8 meaning 8 carbon chain fat. It's called caprylic acid. It's not very high in that. It's mostly lauric acid. And lauric acid doesn't turn into ketones as quickly, but the C8 only MCT oil, which you can go on Amazon. I have one on my store we call Keto Brain. And basically this type of MCT oil, you can just actually add to food and it turns immediately into ketones and helps regulate insulin levels in your bloodstream. Now, still don't recommend like a super high carbohydrate or
I was just going to ask that.
But it does give you a little bit of buffer and leeway. In fact, there was a 2007 study where all they did was added MCT oil. And this was probably a combination of C8, C10, and C12 they went into a nursing home, and they had all these people with dementia or different forms of dementia. And they had them fill out a questionnaire, basically a cognitive scoring questionnaire on the front end. And then they added in MCT oil to their meals. That's all they did, in assisted living, nursing home, they have to feed them real healthy foods. And then they tested it again 30 days later. And all these people had significantly improved scores on their cognitive assessment. And that's all they did, right? And it's like tasteless, right? The oil. Right. The only thing is, if you take too much too quickly, right? You got to be close to the bathroom. Right? So I always recommend starting people small. You start out with like a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon, right? And you gradually work your way up. And you see what your bowel tolerance level is. Right. But those are ways of, and then exercise also really helps with this too, because exercise helps drive down your blood sugar, improve your insulin sensitivity. So, exercise, obviously you and I are both advocates. That should be a part of everybody's lifestyle. Regular movement, and then some sort of, I always differentiate exercise and movement. Movement is something we all should be doing really as much as we can throughout the day. And that's just walking and just getting up and moving. Get up and move. Exactly. Exercise, I consider something that's more high intensity, right? Yeah, so it's more intentional. More intentional burst training. It's uncomfortable. Yeah.